The overall title of the work is Not Business as Usual. And the project came about as a collaboration with the Glucksman and Cork University Business School. For a semester in 2023, I spent a number of weeks, an entire semester, working with a number of students from the Cork University Business School. And in particular, we were looking at the Sustainable Developmental Goal of inequalities, of reduced inequalities. It's number 17 on the Sustainable Developmental Goals. And collectively, we chose this goal to think about throughout the semester and to kind of reflect on kind of the role of photography in articulating or communicating inequalities. So you can imagine this was quite the complex task to undertake. But we did so, through workshops, to photo walks, to critical exchange, like lots of writing, lots of thinking, lots of photographs, and looking at these methods as kind of ways in which to think about this subject matter. So when that sort of period of time elapsed, it was up to me then to kind of take this material, take this experience and reflect on it and sort of think about it in the production of new work. And the combination of that is the work that you see here in the Glucksman, here to my left and to my right, collectively known as Not Business as Usual. But I want to talk a little bit about like how this came to be, because you don't necessarily always sort of have that information to hand. So I suppose when I finished that commission process, or the teaching process, or that aspect of the commission, I used to come to UCC a lot on a Sunday, when almost the students were edited out of the campus, mostly or primarily at least. And I would walk around the campus and I'd be thinking about our exchanges and thinking about our time together. And also I wanted to be somehow in the space in which they populated, because one of the things that we talked about a lot during our exchanges and time together was this idea of like how inequalities affect their lives, and also how inequalities affect their field of study for, as business students. Like being in the campus or being on campus and being in that space became a kind of segue into me kind of thinking about what might be a way in which I articulate not only my experiences and that time, our time together, but also what would the work look like. So I used to spend a lot of time like walking around UCC. I would come in on a Sunday, psych myself up, say okay, and not really knowing actually what I was going to take photographs of. And I think that's important to acknowledge and to accept this idea that of not knowing being useful, and that kind of process of working your way through something. It's a difficult one to really explain or articulate, but for some reason or another, I became obsessed with this yew tree, which is located very close here to the Glucksman. And when we did our exchanges and photo walks and various different kind of assignments that I would put together for the students, we often did them on the campus. We would do them close by, in Fitzgerald's Park, or we would do them on campus. We would sometimes do them here in the gallery. So that proximity became kind of useful, like a useful parameter in which work might be created. So that kind of closeness to the gallery felt important, and this tree somehow began to stand out for me. And I began to do a little bit more research around this tree, and the tree itself, has this kind of dual nature. It exists in this kind of liminal state where it is both toxic and at the same time spiritual. So it has like good qualities and bad qualities, and this is like some of the things that we spoke about with the students, is this idea that where there are inequalities, there are equalities. Where there is rich, there is poor. Where there is just injustice, there is fairness. And that really stuck out with me, this kind of binary, or this kind of liminal state that both this yew tree exists in, and also inequalities in a broad sense. So it became the kind of instrument then where I began to think about, actually, this could be a useful kind of metaphor in many ways, in which to kind of think about and tease out this idea of inequalities. So I began to look at the tree, study it a little bit, and it began to occur to me that the kind of horizon line across these photographs, it began to kind of mimic or look like the kind of analytical tool that is often deployed in the business world, of the candlestick chart, the key tool in which, to measure the market. And I thought this was quite apt, I suppose, because of course, I was working with the business students, and somehow I wanted them to be able to articulate, or at least engage with, or see our time together in some way or form in the kind of work that I created. And of course, insofar as photography is its own kind of language, so too is this analytical tool of the candlestick chart that is used in the business world, a marker for many things, but more than anything, a marker for decisions. And where there are decisions, there are outcomes and there are impacts. So all of those things were kind of interesting for me and useful for me to think about. And this tree became the playground in which all of these kinds of ideas were teased out. And then I began to think about, what happens if I trace the horizon line of this tree? And I began a lot of experiments around that, like looking at, just tracing one of them, and just to see, when you abstracted it from the yew tree itself, what it looked like. And I could really, in this piece here, there are two pieces, obviously, that inform the work. We have the 4 photographs of the yew tree, which I spoke about. This piece I've entitled, "Will You Be an Agent of Change?" And this piece behind me here, which is the tracings of the horizon lines, and this is called Small Scale Studies for Brighter Futures. And the idea behind this piece was that I took the various tracings, I would trace them, and I thought, how are things measured in the business world? They're often measured through the 4 business quarters of the year. And I thought, what if I take 4 of these photographs, which I had quite a few of, I would add, from my time spent, negotiating the UCC campus. And what if I kind of, garner those 4 photographs and think about them within the context of the business year, and start to kind of join them up and trace across that horizon line. And then I began to think about, well, what happens if I swap them around? What does that mean visually? And also, what does it mean conceptually? So I began to think about the idea that by swapping them around, there was a capacity for change. There was a capacity for action. There was a capacity for something else. Something that would perhaps challenge the status quo. And when we think about the idea of inequalities, those kinds of terms are very important, like change, perspective, action, responding. All those kinds of terms felt echoed in many senses in the idea of swapping the photographs around. And one of the aspects that is also kind of relevant or important in this work is the idea that when it does get exhibited, that there is this kind of capacity, curatorial role of changing the order of the photographs. And in doing so, the outcomes kind of change. The outcomes have a capacity to change, even conceptually. The idea of legacy and the idea of endurance, and that's something that you create as an artist belongs not only to you, but also to the publics that might engage with it, forever. So that feels like a huge honor as an artist. It's like to think that something that you might have created that was inspired by students from a semester in the Cork University School, now prevails in the public arena forever. I suppose I would like audiences to kind of firstly, think about the kind of aesthetic value that the work holds, but also this idea that, that there are many kind of different layers